Hey everybody, today I want to talk to you about something that's a little bit off the beaten path for the things I normally talk about. And it's about the audiovisual setup at our church, a problem we ran into. And it's just something that if somebody else has the same kind of situation, I want to be able to help them out. So I'll tell you what I learned. About maybe 6-8 months ago, our pastor was looking to have a hands-free option for microphone. He doesn't really like speaking in a handheld mic. And so one of the audiovisual guys brought in this neat-looking wireless mic setup. And it was made by a company called AnkerWork. I'm just going to call them AnkerWork. And it had a little box that had a USB-C charger on it. And you open the box, and there's 2 little microphones and a receiver. And you take the receiver and you plug that into wherever you want the signal to go. Like you might plug it into your camera. And the cool thing is you take each of those little microphones and you could put them on an interviewer and an interviewee and have an interview. What we didn't expect was how it was going to behave in our church. He plugged the little receiver unit into our soundboard, and we could see the signal coming from the pastor's mic, and it looked great. And in fact, when we did some sound checks, we could hear him coming through the system. We could hear him come through the speakers, and it just sounded fine. When we heard the pastor speaking in the church, something was not quite right. Couldn't quite figure it out. I tried messing around with EQ, and maybe it was that. Something was off. It came to a head a few weeks ago when we had a special business meeting at the church after hours, and we're all there in the sanctuary, and the pastor had left his mic on, and he walked up among us, and he was trying to explain some policy changes and stuff, and as he was speaking, I was having the hardest time understanding what he was saying, and so I went and got a handheld mic, and I walked up to the pastor. Hey, pastor, let me swap that mic out for you. I handed him the handheld one, and he spoke into it. And he said, was anybody having any problem understanding me? Every single person said, yes. And then he said, can you understand me now? And they all said, yes. The handheld mic, wireless, was awesome. The lapel mic, wireless, was terrible. There was something wrong. The reason it took so long to figure this out is because we have a sister church that's much larger than ours, and they bought the very same setup. They saw what we were using. They said, oh, that's great. Let's get that too. And the pastor was happy to be using the same AnkerWork microphone at both places. And I occasionally play bass at that church. And whenever I was listening to him speak there, I never heard a problem. It was perfect. I could hear the signal great. And on top of that, whenever we listened to the streamed service from our church, it sounded great. So what was going on? It made it sound terrible in person. It turns out what we were hearing was the delay between the direct voice from him speaking and the amplified voice coming from the speakers. And if he was far enough away, we would not have heard his direct voice. In fact, at the other church, the big one, when the pastor occasionally is up there and he starts to speak, hey, can everybody hear me? And everybody's looking at him, I can't hear you, because it's a big enough place that it just swallows up the sound. And so you really can't hear the unamplified voice. That is why the delayed signal didn't really register on anybody at the larger church. But at our small church, it registered immediately. It was obvious that there was something wrong because we could hear the direct sound from his voice and the amplified sound from the speakers. It became even more pronounced that day of the meeting when he was standing right up close to us. And the sound of his natural voice was at the same level as the sound coming from the speakers in the background. And so I decided to get to the bottom of it. The other day I went to the church and I brought this with me. This is a Tascam PCM recorder. And I brought my own wireless setup, which is the RØDE Wireless GO. These are years old. I bought these at in the height of the pandemic. these I know work. I've used them in the past with speakers at church. And so these work. The other ones don't. Let me see what's going on. I had a suspicion, but I wanted to prove it. So I took this guy and I plugged a big stack of dongles into the bottom of it to filter out phantom power and stuff like that. I hooked my little RØDE receiver into it. I then plugged a shotgun mic into this other microphone jack. And so I recorded myself saying some test phrases using the lapel mic, which of course I'd taken the lapel thing and clipped it on my shirt. Just like that. And I spoke the test phrases into my lapel mic and into the shotgun mic at the same time. And therefore, I would get an absolutely perfect recording of how much latency there was between the shotgun mic, which should be instant, and the lapel mic, which is whatever latency RØDE was introducing. I did the same thing with the AnkerWork microphones. I plugged the receiver into this stack of dongles and spoke with the AnkerWork microphone on my shirt instead of this one. What this gave me was two recordings that had left and right channels with two different microphones. One of the channels was the direct and the other channel was the wireless. And when I got home and opened those up in Audacity, I was surprised. And here's the results. You can see that when I opened up the AnkerWork microphone file and did a comparison, I found a delay of 35 milliseconds. And I didn't know what that really meant, so I looked at the results from the RØDE microphone. And there I found a delay of 5 milliseconds. And further investigation told me that 5 milliseconds is really where it's at for these kind of microphones. That's proper latency for a wireless microphone. It turns out that musicians need around 5 milliseconds or less. Human speech, between 10 and 20 is probably the lower bound. When you get above that, you start getting into these weird comb filtering effects, and you get beyond the place where the human brain is able to merge the echo with the direct signal. And so you get to this spot where it's really annoying. If you get beyond 50 milliseconds, nobody would put up with that. They'd throw the thing out and say, this is trash. So 35 milliseconds placed us in that zone where it wasn't bad enough that anybody could figure out that it was too bad to work with. But it was bad enough to make it really difficult to understand him. And just to let you hear how this sounds, I'm going to play two samples. Here is the sample of me speaking into the AnkerWork microphone, delayed by 35 milliseconds from the direct signal. When the voice and the speakers don't agree, your ears get confused. That's why latency makes speech so hard to follow. Pretty bad, huh? Now here is the same test done using the RØDE Wireless GO, delayed by 5 milliseconds. When the voice and the speakers don't agree, your ears get confused. That's why latency makes speech so hard to follow. It's pretty clear which one is the terrible setup and which one is quite reasonable. Now, these are not perfect. These are not the best mics in the world. And we have a better wireless mic setup at the church that people hadn't been using simply because they had the EQ all out of whack. I'm working on getting the EQ set up right for that one, and that's how we're going to go with that. What we learned was don't use microphones that have latency like this for what they're not meant to do. These AnkerWorks microphones are great for streaming interviews and doing video recording, stuff like that. They are not meant for live performances where you might have direct signal mixed with the mic's delayed signal. So there you have it. If you're using a microphone like an AnkerWorks microphone and you hear this terrible interference or this echoey sound that's hard to understand somebody speaking, look at getting microphones that have low latency. Look for microphones that are meant to be used live, like these. And I think that will solve your problem. That's all I got for you today. Thank you for watching.